Hey friends, so now we're in the third video lecture we're talking about preschoolers, so kids between about 3 and 6, that's what this section's about. And we're picking up on we're talking about cognitive development. So the last slide, I introduced some of these basic, or not basic, but some of these terms relevant to the pre-operational thinking. In this one, I want to talk about a concept, it's a really important one, theory of mind. And this is actually one that I kind of think is fun to talk about. But the idea of the theory of mind is or sometimes you'll see it referred to as TOM. So down here it says TOM. But it's basically a kid's ability or anyone's ability to understand that somebody else thinks differently than I do. So they have a theory or they have an understanding of my mind is different from your mind. And this begins to happen around 3 or 5 or somewhere between 3 to 5 years old. And it's critical for a child's successful social and emotional development, because if you think about people or kids or anyone like that, the people that are able to it's about empathy, it's about understanding how someone else is feeling, or that somebody else maybe thinks differently than you, right? So what's it say? They start to understand that thinking happens inside the head. They understand that you have a mind that is different than my mind. They also come to understand this idea that your mental or your internal states may be different than your external states. And what that means is that I may be smiling, but inside I may be very sad. And this is where we might start to see what we would call lying. And think about it, lying is really kind of a complex cognitive task that a child is able to understand, that if they tell you something that is different than what is really true, that you might actually believe them, right? So you can think about maybe when your toddler or your preschooler starts to lie, you can be proud of them for that cognitive development. There's also, pretty sure it's in the module 2, there's a video about something called a false belief task. And this is, oh golly, this is the idea that I know you know something. Let's see, I know that you think. I think the example goes is the doll like hides the toy in the basket. And then when you're not looking, it moves the toy. But it's the idea that I know that you don't know what is right, that I know you know something wrong, or that you have a false belief. Or you may laugh when you open the toy or you open the gift and it looks like it's a can of, what do you call them? A can of that candy and the big thing that shoots out of it, right? Oh man, this isn't helpful. But it's the idea that I can trick you, and I know I can trick you. I can give you this box and tell you that there's a toy in it, and really there's just a dirty sock, right? But it's a cognitive ability to understand that I know something different than you do. Ooh, that's not helping at all. Hopefully the little video will help you a little bit. But this is also, well, there you go. And it says that a 5 to 6-year-olds understand that appearance is not reality, that things can look like they're a toy, but in fact they can be a dirty sock, which again is critical for pretend play, right? These are all very abstract things, and they involve our imagination. What is interesting in your textbook, it makes reference to imaginary friends, and that children who have imaginary friends are more likely to have a richer or a more elaborate narrative. I used to, when I face-to-face class, I would ask them if they had imaginary friends. Mine, her name was Susan, right? But because if you think of it, and not only do you have to learn how to play pretend, and you have to learn how to imagine, but when you have an imaginary friend, you're actually putting that imaginary person and you're giving them their own imagination, right? The things that appear to be influential in a child's development or their learning the theory of mind, one of them is infant social attention. In other words, how much attention we give the infant, the more that we interact, because we are foundationally and fundamentally, we are a social species. And how do we learn about our role? How do we learn about our species is through interaction, right? A child that has multiple language is more likely to have developed theory of mind. It doesn't specify why that is. It does sort of make sense though, because if I know different languages, and effectively I'm learning to think in different ways. and that a child who has a delayed development of theory of mind, this may signal other cognitive impairments later on. For instance, one quality that autistic people struggle with is this theory of mind, and we may actually see children who have this delay because it translates into a kind of empathy, or a theory of mind is foundational to the development of empathy. Okay. So also part of our cognitive development, right, cognition, is memory. Memory that like if you think about memory, if you were in my psychology class, I would be talking about the different elements of memory: encoding, storage, retrieval, right? But what's significant for this chapter is this notion of meta-memory or metacognition. And this is a fancy term for a child is able to think about or understand the way memory works. And the example that's offered in your textbook is somewhere in here. A child learns to understand, right? They understand that memory, that the more you do something, the more you're likely to remember it. Or that you can forget things. I'm trying to think of some of the other examples, but basically it means knowledge about memory. When we think about a child's development of their own memories, there's some other important terms over here. Is the idea of a generic memory. So kids versus an episodic versus an autobiographical. Okay, so a generic memory is something that you do over and over and over again, and a child would develop a script, right? Like riding in a car or going to school. This is the way they get in the car. They buckle up their seatbelt. They pull out of the driveway. This is just a thing that they do over and over and over again, and they develop sort of a script as to how this is typically done. An episodic memory is a memory of a certain episode in one's life. Right. So, and then an autobiographical memory. What does this one say? Your autobiographical memory is the memory of the episodes of your life. Right. So these are the stories that you tell about yourself or about your life. And here's the interesting thing, is that this appears to emerge sometime around 3 or 4. There was a theory for a while that said that children didn't actually form memories until this old, but that has since been discounted and say, no, that's not true. Children learn lots of things before they get to be 3 and 4 years old. But what may be relevant is children have to understand the concept of self. And I don't know if we talked about that in this chapter. They have to have a concept of, actually it is in the next slide. They have to have a concept of self, that they're different, and they have to have some concept of time so that they can tell a story, or that they have some sense of, so that they can form an episode, which is about time, and self being separate from you. I don't know if that makes any sense at all. But the point is that that's the fancy term for these different kinds of memory. And then there's a model of how children learn memory, and this is what we would call social interaction model of memory, which says that a parent's retelling of an event, that a child will develop more sophisticated, more nuanced memories if their parents have a story or a retell style that is of high or low elaboration. In other words, if you grow up in a home where there's lots of storytelling and they go into great detail, right? You learn to think in patterns of detail, and you're exposed to more detail and detail kinds of words. And it's our ability to think and our ability to remember are influenced by the kind of words that we have in our cognition, right? So the more detailed and specific kinds of words that you learn, it's going to influence and contribute to the memories and the way you're able to recall. Because if you think about it, a memory means nothing unless you are able to pull it up and articulate it. In one of the other classes that one of the other chapters, I think in psychology, they talk about is that we are nothing without our memory, right? Who are you? If somebody were to ask you, who are you? You would think about your memories in order to answer that. So in order to answer that, I need the words to articulate the experiences and the memories that I have in order to tell you who I am. Man, I don't know if any of that was clear at all. If not, please message me. Let me know, and I'll try to clarify it again. Okay, I'm going to stop right here.